Summer Food Service Program Annual Training. We are just happy and excited to see you all here, and we want to thank you for joining us for this important training session. I am Allie Lampman, and I will be presenting the slides today along with helping our team through the presentation. I'm going to start off with some housekeeping information. I see many of you have already entered in the chat box your name, your school or organization. Please put your email and also share with us one goal you have for the 2021 Summer Meals program. An example of a goal could be to attract new children in your community, or maybe to service a summer activity. We just would love to hear what you have planned and what goals you have set. And if you haven't set a goal yet, no big deal. This is the perfect time to start thinking about your goal and maybe what you would like to accomplish. Also, a reminder that the training certificate is available on the SFSP training webpage, so be sure to keep a copy for your records. Use the chat box to ask questions anytime during the presentation. We have planned for time at the end of the training to answer questions in the chat box, along with any questions that might come up. Turn your video on if available, and most importantly, mute your microphone during the presentation so that the presenter can be heard clearly. The slides we're sharing today will be available along with other SFSP training resources on the SFSP training webpage, which is located at the website link at the top of this slide. On some of the slides today, you'll see a green handout box, which indicates the form we are sharing guidance for is located in the SFSP training webpage, and you'll find them listed under the SFSP training resource heading, like you see on this slide. Today's training will cover program participation requirements and a summary of flexibilities the current meal service waivers allow. We will also provide information on meal pattern, meal service, and record keeping requirements. And then we'll finish up with some food safety and procurement basics. So let's get started with an overview of program participation requirements. Katie, off to you.
Hey, Allie, thank you. Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. You can go to the next, oh yeah, you can head to the next slide. Yeah, as many of you know here, you're pretty familiar with the Summer Food Service Program meal requirements and participation in the program. We just want to remind you of a couple of important things: that the program is intended to provide free meals to children only. You may have adults accompanying children to meal service sites, which is okay as long as they pay for the meal that they receive. So that's why it's important to set that adult meal price. And we'll talk about that here in a little bit in regard to application updates. But and again, just reiterating that adults are not intended to receive free meals from the program. The free meals are for the children only. They can receive a meal, but they must pay for it. And there are a couple of allowable meal combinations that the summer program allows. That includes breakfast and lunch, breakfast and supper, breakfast and snack, as well as lunch and snack. A couple of things to note here: it is not allowed to serve both lunch and supper to any participants, so that meal combination is not allowed. And the program also doesn't allow for service of a combination, I should say, of 3 meals or snacks. You can go to the next slide, Allie. Requirements of participation also include that you validate for us and demonstrate for us that you're a viable, capable, and accountable sponsor of the program. We need to have you demonstrate for us that you've got the resources to manage and supervise meal service, which many of you do, and you're very well experienced sponsors of child nutrition programs. We require that you adhere to the record keeping requirements, that you maintain a current and accurate online application, and that you submit your monthly claims for reimbursement on time. You can head to the next slide, Allie. Yeah, quick reminder here, this is where you access your online application. At the link at the top of this slide, and you're probably all pretty familiar with this. You've kept your application up to date, probably with revisions several times this school year. We have a whole handout dedicated to new people who have not completed the application yet this year. We've got a comprehensive guide. And if you go to the next slide, Allie, I believe. Yep, for those of you who got an application in the system because you've participated in the program during this school year as a way to serve meals to students, you'll just be making a few revisions to your application, including updating meal service information for the sites that you will be continuing to operate during the summer months, and possibly a revision or update to that adult meal packages section of the application. And this how-to guide for updating your application is available on the website as well. But we do ask you to hold off on making those updates until May 6th. We're anticipating information from the USDA about the return to school. The return to school for the upcoming school year. We're not sure exactly what kind of guidance is going to be issued there. If it happens that there should be an extension to being able to utilize the SFSP for meals during the school year, that obviously would influence maybe the updates you make to site applications in the system. So I want you to hold off on that until May 6th, but please feel free to access the application update guide just to become familiar with what things you're going to be asked to change for the summertime meal service information. You can head to the next one, Allie. Yeah. A quick reminder, if you have a change in site supervisor identification in your site applications, we want to make sure that you not only update meal service information, but also who you've identified as your summertime site supervisors. These folks are responsible for being at the site every day. They should be supervising meal preparation and service. They should ensure that other site staff are maintaining daily records, that the meals served to children include all required components, and that daily point of service meal count form is completed when the meals are served. You can head to the next one, Allie. A couple of quick reminders you're probably all familiar with, but if you're operating in different ways or different locations this summer, we want to make sure you know that you need to post the green and white and Justice for All poster in a common place where all participants could view it. If you need additional posters or replacements for ones that may be torn or wrinkled, feel free to contact us. We do offer these replacement posters free of charge. And then one more reminder regarding civil rights compliance on the next slide. Make sure that all of your staff are trained on civil rights requirements annually. If you have new staff coming on board to help support your summertime meal service, make sure that you refer them to the civil rights training available on our website that you can access at the link on the slide here. These slides were published and provided to you in advance of the training. They'll also be posted on the website in case you need to be able to access the link to this civil rights training. Make sure to record who attends and the date that they completed that training. And we can head to the next slide, Allie. Yeah, we've got those basics kind of quickly reviewed and under control. I'm going to toss it over to Sean. She's going to share some important updates about waivers that are available for summertime meal operation.
Thank you, Katie. Well, on March 9th, the USDA released extensions of needed flexibilities for summer 2021 operations. As of today, these waivers do not address the start of school in August, as Katie mentioned previously. The USDA is expected to release further guidance regarding ifs and what's of the waivers that may be extended soon. So we are somewhat on a holding pattern until we receive that guidance from USDA to provide you additional guidance of what the start of the school year might look like. So today we will be talking about 4 very important waivers that were extended for this summer. The first 3 are listed on the slide, and we will be reviewing the 4th on a later slide. So the first waiver I want to talk about is the nationwide waiver for meal service time restrictions. This waiver permits flexibility in regard to service time and duration of time to serve meals. Meals can be served at different times than normally would be acceptable in the summer food service program and are not limited to be served during a specific length of time. The second important waiver for you to be familiar with is the waiver that allows for non-congregate meal service. This means meals can be provided through grab and go, delivery to homes, or drive-through concept. This waiver is used in conjunction with the meal service flexibility, and it allows for up to 7 days of meals to be provided. The last waiver on the slide addresses parent, guardian, or other adult pickup of meals. This waiver allows for these individuals to pick up meals for specific children and to take these meals home to be consumed. The waiver also allows that children do not have to be present with the adult for the meals to be picked up. Allie, would you go to the next slide, please? Okay. Now, on this slide, I want to talk about sponsors may utilize these waivers, but are not required to. Several sponsors I have operating their summer food service program on site, of course, with extra precautions in place, but they want to operate as they have done in previous pre-COVID summers. Sponsors also have the option of offering both congregate and non-congregate meal service. For sponsors with multiple sites, they may utilize different service methods for individual sites, which allows them more flexibility. But the key point that every sponsor needs to consider is you must ensure the integrity and accuracy of meal count, no matter which service method you utilize. So with that being said, we are going to have a polling question. Allie, can you launch that polling question?
Yes.
Okay, the question is, how will you as a summer food service sponsor be offering meals for this summer? And you can pick more than one. The first one is sponsor has not determined how meals will be offered this summer. Children will receive meals on site or in a congregate setting. Some children will receive meals on site, and the sponsor will also offer adult pickup of meals for other children. So utilizing the non-congregate waiver, or strictly adult pickup for non-congregate meals. So no meals on site, strictly the grab and go or delivery, or now I forgot the third one, drive-through. Thank you. Came to me. Okay, give you a couple of seconds to complete that. And Allie, you can kind of let us know how we're doing on responses.
We are, looks like everyone is almost voted. So I'm going to go ahead and end the polling and
Perfect.
Share the results with you.
Okay, so it looks like we've got some that just haven't decided yet, and some that are going to be the traditional on-site meal service. And then we have pretty much a split with the center two. Children will receive meals on-site, congregate. Oh, yes. And then kind of a combination of both methods. So thank you very much for responding to that poll. And we will go to the next slide. For those sponsors that have not yet determined how they will be providing meal service, and for even those sponsors that have, we just want to talk about some things to consider as you move forward with your summer food service operations. The first one is staffing. And I think everyone would agree with me that at this point, all staff in schools, pretty much everyone, has some degree of COVID-19 fatigue. It has been a long year. And so with that being said, do you have enough willing staff to operate the program? Do you have food service staff to order, prepare, package food? Do you have staff to distribute, staff to ensure an accurate point of service meal count, and then administrative staff to compile meal counts, track costs, and file reimbursement claims? So just all things to consider with staffing, because that is probably one of the most important aspects of the program, is having adequate staffing. The next is menu planning. Making sure that you are planning menus to meet meal pattern requirements and that you are maintaining food quality if meals are going to be offered in a non-congregate setting. The next one is procuring disposable serviceware. As all of you are probably familiar, if you operated last summer or last March when we had the unanticipated school closure, procuring disposable ware was difficult. Our office still hears of some of these difficulties, and it takes time to package multiple days of meals, and it takes staffing to do that. It also takes space to do that, to ensure that you are maintaining quality and that the food items stay safe. So just some things to consider. And on the next slide, the next thing that you need to consider if offering multiple days of menus or meals is, do your households have refrigerator and freezer space and other storage space to safely store multiple days of meals? If we're talking about maybe a household that picks up meals for 3 children and you are distributing 5 days worth of breakfast and lunch meals, if we do the math just with the milk, that would be about 3 times 5 is 15. And if you're providing cartons of milk, that would be approximately 30 cartons of milk. That's a lot of storage space for households. And I know many of you don't offer up to 5 days, but some have. Would you be distributing for 2 days, 3 days, 4 days? Would it be a single day pickup? So just some things to think about as you plan ahead. And then the last food service consideration is when food is sent for multiple days of meals in bulk, the household must be provided with a daily menu. So daily menus for the meals that you are distributing. So what is the meal for breakfast on, let's say, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then the portion size for each food component if you are sending meals in bulk. And then storage and serving instructions for the different food items. So those are things to consider as you plan on how you will be implementing meal service for summer operations. So next slide, Allie. And then I want to talk about program integrity. And I think this is where we launch our next polling question, right, Allie?
Yes.
Okay, the question I want some input on from you is, how will you, as the summer food service sponsor, ensure program integrity if permitting adult pickup of meals? Mark all that apply. The first one is children have to be present for meal pickup. Adults must provide the first and last names of children meals are picked up for. Adults must provide student ID numbers and or other documentation for children meals are picked up for. And the last one is sponsors with multiple sites will periodically cross-check meal distribution sign-in lists to ensure duplicate meals are not picked up.
We're about 50% voted.
Kind of a thought-provoking question, but program integrity has to be maintained. Especially when we're talking about distributing meals in the non-congregate setting.
Okay, I think we're there.
Okay. Okay, it looks like 77% of you said adults must provide the first and last names of children that the meals are picked up for. That's great, good. Now, I know many of you don't have multiple sites that you will be distributing, but I do want to mention that periodically cross-checking those lists is a good idea to ensure that, you know, I'd hate to think a household would go to one site and then go to another site to pick up meals, but it could happen. And it's just another step in the process to ensure integrity of the program. So we'll go ahead and talk about program integrity and each one of these just a little bit more in detail. It's important to post signage that the SFSP program is for children ages 1 through 18. We don't want any adults that are picking up meals to think that, well, I can pick up meals for all members of our household, even if I have children over 18, or perhaps myself, if you don't have some safeguards in place for gathering the names of children. So we want to have signage up front. The second is record the first and last name of children. And that seemed like what the majority of you intend on doing for this summer. And if we move to the next slide, you can consider setting a limit for how many meals can be picked up without proof. So perhaps maybe if a household comes through and they want to pick up meals for 5 different children and you don't have knowledge of that household, that you could require student IDs or some other documentation to be provided for, you know, that many number of meals that are being picked up. An integrity plan, I must mention, is your own plan. So you have to determine how you will ensure integrity. These are only ideas and different examples that you may want to consider. And then lastly, just that cross-checking for multiple sites, that meals aren't being picked up for the same meal by the same household. So that's all we want to talk about program integrity, something to definitely consider as you plan your program. And then we'll move on to the next slide. Now, the fourth waiver allows for the annual site review, which is required within the first 4 weeks of operation, to be completed off-site. It can be completed on-site, but the waiver allows for it to be completed off-site if that is something that the sponsor feels would be an advantage, maybe not having to go on-site. But the annual site review serves a lot of different purposes because it helps identify any operational problems. The site review must be completed for all sites that the sponsor operates. So if you operate one site, it's one site review for that site. If you operate 2 sites, then it's 2 site reviews, one for both sites. It needs to be completed within the first 4 weeks. And if you are asking, well, our program is going to operate less than 4 weeks, we don't have to do that. Well, no, you do have to do that. It's a requirement and it needs to be completed, and it is maintained on site. You do not send it into our office. It is for the sponsor's review of how the program is operating. If you will be reviewed this summer by the state agency, we will request to see your site review, but you don't send it into our office. It's kept with your file of information. There is a specific COVID-19 site review form that is available on our website, and that will be made available that you can utilize because operations are a little bit different because of all the waivers. And so the form has been revised to take that into consideration. Now, if you have been operating, you're probably asking yourself, well, I've already done this. I don't need to do it again. But you're reminded that you will be operating probably a little differently this summer than you have during the school year. And you need to complete another site review. So that's all I have, and I want to turn it over to Donna. Donna's going to be talking about meal pattern and production records.
Well, I thank you so much, Sean, and hello, everyone. It's so good to see so many people on this afternoon. I'm sure you're really busy. And I also like to see a lot of those goals that are in the chat box. It's very encouraging, lots more reaching out to provide meals for these kiddos. So we're going to start off today by talking about meal requirements. And you probably are aware that you can choose to follow either the Summer Food Service Program or the NSLP National School Lunch Program meal pattern. Offer versus serve cannot be implemented if grab-and-go meals are being provided. So in considering which meal pattern to follow, keep in mind that the SFSP meal pattern requirements are easier to meet and they are a better fit for grab-and-go meals. So you might want to keep that in mind a little bit. Next, please. Okay, this is a picture of something that probably looks familiar to you also. It's the SFSP meal pattern for breakfast, lunch, supper, and snack that's available on our website. One thing I want you to note with this meal pattern is that the serving sizes are different than those of the NSLP meal pattern. And there are also no grade group requirements. Serving sizes are the same for all ages. So now let's look a little bit more closely at the breakfast and lunch SFSP meal patterns. Next, please. Okay, so here is the breakfast meal pattern. To be reimbursable, the meal must contain 3 components: 1 serving of milk, 1 serving of a fruit and or vegetable or full strength juice, and 1 serving of grain. You must provide at least the minimum serving size of each component. However, you can provide more. Juice must be 100% juice. However, we strongly encourage you to serve whole fruits or vegetables, and all grain items must be either enriched or whole grain. And again, just to point out, the serving sizes are different than those of the NSLP meal pattern, and the serving size is the same for all ages. Okay, next slide, please. All right, so for lunch or supper to be a reimbursable meal, the meal must contain all 4 components and 5 items. 1 serving of fluid milk, 2 or more servings of fruit, vegetable items. And if you note on the slide on the left side, under 5 items in the green, the fruit, vegetable items can be 2 fruit or 2 vegetable, or 1 fruit plus 1 vegetable. So you have some flexibility there to put together some nice combinations. A grain bread item is also required, and a meat alternate. And again, you must provide at least the minimum serving size of each component. However, you can provide more. Some schools provide more for their older students, for example. And the same rules with juice apply. If it's served, it must be 100% juice. But again, you know how we are. We strongly encourage you to serve whole fruits or vegetables. However, there's something a little different with lunch and supper. Juice may be counted to meet not more than 1/2 of this requirement. And again, all grain items must be enriched or whole grain. And one more time, serving sizes are the same for all ages. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Now we're going to talk a little bit about offer versus serve. If students are allowed to choose their components and you want to implement offer versus serve, here are the requirements. This is for breakfast. You must offer at least 3 items from the 3 components. The 3 are fruit, vegetable, grain, and milk. Plus, you must add 1 additional serving from either the fruit, vegetable, or grains bread group, or you can add a serving of meat alternate. All of the food items must be different from each other. And on the slide, we give you a couple of examples. For example, if you're offering flake cereal and puff cereal on one day, remember they are the same food item and would only count as 1 item since they are both from the grain category. Another example would be apple slices and apple juice. They are the same food item, again, both from apples, and would count as only 1 item. A child must take at least 3 different food items from the items offered. Okay, next slide, please. We're going to look at an example. Let's say we have for breakfast a menu that includes a muffin, which actually is a 2-ounce muffin, assorted cold cereals, 1-ounce size apiece, an orange, and 8 ounces of milk. And I do have an asterisk by the muffin because I want to point out that a 2-ounce muffin counts as 1 of the 3 required meal items, not to be confused as counting as 2 items as it would in school lunch, NSLP. So that's one difference to keep in mind. So we have our menu here. Remember, we have a muffin, 2 different types of cold cereals, an orange, and milk. So the next slide shows that a child chose the muffin, the orange, and milk. So I believe Allie has a polling question. She's going to ask us if this is a reimbursable meal. Oh, the suspense.
We're almost there.
All right.
Here we go.
Oh, do you know how smart you people are today? You are incredibly intelligent. Thank you. Yes, because the child must choose from the 3 different items, right? The 3 different groups. And this is definitely a reimbursable meal. All right, next slide, we're going to tackle lunch OVS in the summer food program. Okay, so in lunch, you must offer at least 5 items from the 4 component groups. And so let's list them out here. 1 serving of meat alternate, which would be a 2-ounce equivalent minimum. 2 different servings of fruit and or vegetable. And remember, these have to be 2 different food items. 1 serving of grain bread and 1 serving of fluid milk. So you have your 4 components and you're offering 2 items from the fruit and vegetable group. All of the items, once again, must be different from each other. And a child must take at least 3 food components, not just 3 items as required in breakfast. All right, so let's go to the next slide and let's look at an example again. On the menu today is cheeseburger on a bun, green beans, apple wedges, and milk. So at the bottom of this slide, the question is asked, if a child takes a cheeseburger on a bun and green beans, is this a reimbursable meal?
We're about halfway there. I'll give a few more seconds. There you go, Donna.
Okay, not quite as good as last time, but still pretty darn good. Okay, so why is this a reimbursable meal? The child chose the meat alternate with the cheeseburger, the bun is the grain bread, and the fruit vegetable is the green beans. So going to the next slide, again, we see that that example at the top, and reminding you that the child must choose at least 3 components. So yes to the first example, and we don't have a poll question for the second example, but it's actually, if the child takes bun only, apple wedges, and milk, that would also be a reimbursable meal. There are 3 components, and that would be the minimum that they would have to take. Okay, so now let's switch gears a little bit and shift from offer versus serve to production records. And the very first word on this slide is documentation. And you know how crazy we are at Nutrition Services for documentation. We absolutely love it when we get perfectly documented production records, because that means that things are going to be good. So production records are really important, as you know, because they provide documentation that all required components were provided in the proper amounts to meet the minimum required serving sizes. So it's telling us about the components that were provided and the minimum required serving sizes, if they were also provided. Daily records for all meals served must be completed as the meal is prepared, not the day before or the day after, but the day the meal is prepared. And you must have a production record for every meal claim for reimbursement that is clear and complete. Okay, so next slide, we're going to start talking about a summer food service production record. And the first thing, before we even talk about this, I want to mention that at the bottom of the slide, it does say you can continue using the NSLP production records if you want to. What we care about is complete, accurate information on these records, so it doesn't matter which one you use as long as they're filled out properly. But let's go ahead and look at the summer food service production record that we see here. And you notice that at the top, the sponsor name and the site name have been written in, and you can write in this information. Maybe you can add some of the food items that are offered on a daily basis, like milk And then you can make photocopies to cut down on the amount of time it takes to complete these. Might be a little bit helpful. So on this one, you circle each meal type, and at the top we see lunch has been circled. And then it's very important to write in the full date, the month, the day of the month, and the year. And in the green circle on the top right, we have an example of that, not just June 6th, but June 6th, 2021. So very important to complete this part properly. So let's go down to the next slide. And we're going to be talking now about the top part of the production record. And obviously the one previously that we just looked at was for lunch. We've shifted gears now. We're showing you one for breakfast. Breakfast is circled at the top. Sponsor name, site name are provided, and the complete date is provided. So what you want to do, this is an example of a grab and go breakfast production record. The top part should be completed by entering the planned number of meals, which is 100. And then in the left-hand column, you list each food item offered. And you see for this breakfast, it was mini bagels, orange juice, and milk. And remember, this is a grab and go example. I really want to emphasize, please don't forget to list the milk. I think people just forget about listing it because it's offered every day. And we see a lot of milk missing from this top part of the production record. And if you screw your head around to the left a little bit, you notice in that green line, it says, make sure meal pattern has been met. And this is what we're looking at right now, is making sure that meal pattern has been met. So on the right-hand side in that column, you're going to list the serving sizes offered. And please do not write one each. That means nothing to us when we look at this because we don't know one each. How big is that one each? So this is a great example. Mini bagels, it specifically says 1 ounce. Orange juice, 1/2 cup. Milk, 8 fluid ounces. And we should be able to look at this. This is just the top portion, but we should be able to look at this and say, hey, this meets meal pattern. We have the correct components on the left and the correct minimum serving sizes on the right. So again, all required information. You're going to get sick of me saying that, aren't you? Sean says, no, say it, Donna. But we want you guys to do this properly and make sure you do it completely so that we all have a good time at, when we review your records. Well, as good a time as we can have. Okay, so this is the bottom portion of the production record. And again, all 4 columns have to be completed correctly. Left column is the food item and the form. So it's orange juice, milk 1%, and so on. Be as specific as you can. Second column, you will, if it's a school recipe, you can list the recipe number with the number of servings prepared, or as in the case on this record, they use the product name. They do not include a number, but you can if it's applicable. And the reason, there are a couple of reasons you would put in a product number if it may be different. One example would be chicken nuggets. How many different kinds of chicken nuggets do you guys have to choose from? It's like going to the light bulb aisle in Walmart, isn't it? It's like I can never figure out which light bulb to choose. But once you find what you like, you want to keep track of that number because that will be helpful to you to choose a quality product the next time. And then another really important reason, what if there's a food recall? What if something has to be recalled or there is some food safety issue with a food with a certain number on it? And that would also help you track that information. So product name and number. The third thing that you could list here is commodity. Most people just write a big C and we know it's a commodity product. Total amount prepared. And this is a really good specific example. For example, the orange juice, there were 100 1/2 cup servings, 100 1 ounce bagels, and so on. Another thing that we see a lot that is left blank on production records is the amount left over column. Please complete that. it gives us and you also a full picture of what you use that day, and it helps a lot. So do complete the amount left over column. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, continuing with documentation, making it complete. Combination dishes and processed foods. You know, you cannot look at a chicken patty and figure out by yourself, even if you weigh it, how much of it's meat and how much of it is bread or grain. And so the CN label or product formulation statement is really important to have for all processed or combination items. They state the amount of creditable meat alternate, fruit, vegetable, and grain bread, and therefore how these items contribute to meal pattern. Do not serve commercially prepared combination food items without a CN label or product formulation statement. Two really important pieces of documentation. So the next slide shows us a CN label. I'm sure this is familiar to all of you, but this is a really good example because it is a chicken patty fritter. And, you know, it's whole grain, strip shaped, 1.18 ounce, fully cooked. And how does that, and then it says 3 of them together, how do they credit? Because 3 is considered to be a serving. So it tells you provides 2 ounce equivalent meat alternate, 1 ounce equivalent grains. And that is your official documentation. Now, what if you don't have a child nutrition label and you don't have any information about crediting? Then you would request from your distributor or the company a product formulation statement. And on the next 2 slides, I have taken a product formulation statement and cut it into 2 pieces so we can see it more clearly. But this is an example of a product formulation statement. This is the top portion. And on the top portion, you note that it's for a meat alternate. Go down to the first table. You'll see it shows the calculation that documents the creditable amount. They use the food buying guide to determine from the weight of the chicken what the creditable amount of chicken is. This information must be on company letterhead. It must state the company contact information and be signed by an official company rep. And the item label, you should also grab that from the box or wherever you can find it and keep it on file with this form. So let's look at the bottom part of this form on the next slide. And you notice that there's a summary, the total weight, total creditable amount. Remember, this is for meat alternate. Then it's signed by Bob Chicken. And the title, his title is Vice President of Roosting and Depositing. Maybe we'll use that instead of R&D. Okay, and then the date and phone number, contact information. So this is a complete product formulation statement that is signed, and that's a really important point to make. The last part of documentation is on the next slide, and that is your school recipe. We're really trying to roll out some training for standardized recipes and help you folks if you don't have all of your recipes standardized, but this is the type of form we expect to see with review materials. And this happens to be a standardized recipe from the USDA, and it's for chili. And again, not only does it give you the way to make the chili, I mean, it means that if a person follows this recipe the way it's written, one person can make the chili, a second person makes the chili the next week, and it tastes the same. So that's a good thing. But down at the bottom of this form, it also talks and shows you the meal pattern contribution. For an elementary serving size of 1/2 cup, it credits for 2 ounces meat alternate, and 3/8 cup fruit vegetable. And again, crediting information is very important to show that you have met meal pattern. Okay, last slide coming up. Whew, you say, good grief, that's good news. All right, so it's so very important to keep complete records that show you meet meal pattern for every single meal. Missing meal components or incomplete records can result in a disallowance of reimbursement. And you see that sad face up there? It looks like an M&M, doesn't he? And it's sad M&M. That means that we don't like taking money away from you. We would rather see complete records and have everything go smoothly. So we do recommend a procedure to review records each day to ensure all details are recorded. And a good way to do this is to have a second person who obviously knows how to fill out complete production records, to have a second person review the record at the end of each day to ensure it is complete. You can then maybe 3-hole punch it, put it in your folder or whatever you want to do, and it will be a done deal. So going to the next slide. I think it's time to take a break. Let's take 3 minutes to step away if you need to stand up and stretch. We have another hour or so to go. When we come back, Erica will start us off with meal counting and claiming, but right now I have 2:51 on my clock. I would say I'm going to give you an extra minute. I'd say let's come back at 2:55. Thank you.
Okay, it's 2:55. Hopefully you all got a stretch in. We're gonna just keep moving along. Up next is Erica.
Thanks, Allie. Yeah, up next we'll be talking about meal counting and claiming. You can go ahead and go to the next slide, Allie. So as part of the summer food service program requirements, you do need to have documentation of the number of reimbursable meals served each day to support your claim for reimbursement. So we're continuing with Donna's documentation theme here. There are 2 daily meal count forms available on our website. You can pick the form that best meets your needs based on whether you will be providing meals on site, doing pickup or grab and go, delivery, or multi-day meal distribution. If you are operating a closed enrolled site, you could also continue to use your point of service software or a roster for counting meals if you so choose to do that as well, if that's easier for you. The form on the left is the daily meal count form that can be used for single day or single meal distribution. Some examples of when you might want to use this form would be for traditional on-site meal service, or you could also use it for pickup or grab and go meals if you're distributing just 1 day's worth of meals. The multi-day count form on the right can be used if you're distributing 1 or both meals for more than 1 day at a time, and you want to track all of those meals on one form without having to fill out a meal count form for each of those days. Once again, you can choose the method that works best for you and your operation, as long as it's easy to identify the number of meals being claimed and the days the meals are being claimed for. We will be talking more about both of these forms here in the upcoming slides and how to fill those out. Next slide, Allie. So no matter what form you use, make sure that all meals claimed for reimbursement are documented on a daily meal count form for every day that meals are served. This form must be completed at the time of meal service. We don't want you to complete it before or try to recreate it after meal service. And use tally marks to cross out one number at a time when each child receives the meal or package of meals with all required components. Here we see some examples of the correct and incorrect methods for completing daily meal count forms. The top row, enclosed with the green box, is the correct method for marking the meals provided to children. The second row, enclosed in the red box, is the incorrect method for marking meals, as one line is made all the way through the numbers 21 through 36. Each number must be marked one at a time as a staff member observes each child receiving the meal with all required components. It is a violation of program requirements to mark the number of meals on this form before the meals are served. So in this example, only 6 meals would be allowed to be claimed for reimbursement. slide. During summer, you can use one daily meal count form if you're distributing breakfast and lunch together, rather than having to have a separate form for breakfast and a separate form for lunch. So in order to do that, you do need to indicate on the form that both breakfast and lunch are being circled. So in the example to the right there, both breakfast and lunch are circled on the multi-day meal count form to indicate that you're counting both of those meals on that one form. You could do this, let's say, for example, if you wanted to distribute breakfast and lunch for Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, you could document those all on one form. Or on Thursday, maybe you're going to hand out lunch for Thursday, breakfast and lunch for Friday, and breakfast for Monday. That would be 2 of each type of meal, 2 breakfasts and 2 lunches. And in both scenarios, as long as a child cannot opt out of any meal that is meant to be part of the distribution, you can use one meal count form to document the number of meals served. However, if you're going to allow them to say, let's say they don't want one of the breakfasts and they just want to take the lunches, then you do need to use a separate form for breakfast and a separate form for lunch so that you have an accurate meal count. Next slide. This here is an example of how to complete the multi-day meal count form. At the top, you'll want to fill out the site information and indicate which meals and the dates the form is being completed for. So in this example, you can see this form is only for lunch for June 1st, 2nd, and 3rd. And they have prepared 150 meals, plus they have 15 meals available from the previous day to give them a total of 165 meals available to distribute. The first meals you serve down below cannot exceed the number of meals you have available here. The red tally marks are marked off one at a time for each child that receives a package of 3 lunches. You can see they handed out lunches to 52 children. Box A down below indicates the number of meals included in each package and should correspond with the dates and number of days at the top of the form. So in this case, 3 days worth of lunches were handed out, so 3 is entered into box A. The number of children that receive lunches is entered into box B, which is 52 here, and that corresponds to the tally marks above. And then to get the total number of lunches distributed for box C, you would take 3 times 52 to equal 156 lunches. 156 is the total number of meals that goes into your monthly claim. Now, if both breakfast and lunch were circled at the top of the form, then you would claim 156 breakfasts and 156 lunches. Next slide, Allie. The next slide is an example of how to complete a daily meal count form for single meal or single day meal distribution. This daily meal count form, this example is for lunch on June 2nd. The tally marks are marked off one at a time after the child receives the reimbursable meal. And in this example, we can see that they handed out 17 first meals to children. This form also has a place to mark second meals, program adult meals for those who are directly involved in serving or preparing meals or serving or supervising meal service. And it has a place for non-program adults, such as parents, where income would need to be collected for those meals marked on that line. You would claim the 17 first lunches served on your claim for reimbursement. You could also claim the 2 second lunches served, and we'll talk more about that here in the upcoming slides. And also, we can see here that the total meals served, in this case 21, does not exceed the total meals available up top, which was 23. Next slide, Allie. So claiming second meals was not an option for the summer food service program during the school year, but during regular summer operations, it is acceptable to claim second meals. You cannot provide second meals for delivery or pickup or multi-day distribution options, obviously. So if you decide to allow second meals, it would only be for the traditional on-site meal service. If you do provide second meals, remember that you must provide all required meal components to claim a second meal. You can't just provide a second helping of the main entree. That would not be allowed to be claimed as a second meal. You can serve second meals only after all children at the site have received a first meal. And you need to record all second meals on the meal count sheet separate from the first meals, as we saw in the example on the previous slide. The summer food service program is intended to provide 1 meal per child at each meal service. So offering or allowing second meals is definitely not required by the sponsor, and many sponsors choose not to provide second meals. Next slide, Allie. And probably one reason for that is because reimbursement for second meals is only allowed for up to 2% of the first meals served. So for example, if you serve 55 first meals and 10 second meals, you're only going to get reimbursement for one of those second meals, because 55 times 2% is 1.1. So you do need to have money to cover the cost of those meals above the 2% threshold, and that cannot come from your summer food service program reimbursement. So then you will need to determine how those other 9 meals will be paid for. Next slide. The following ways are ways of counting meals that are not allowed. So you cannot count meals by using a morning preparation meal count or anticipated meal counts. You cannot count meals before the meal is received by the child. And you cannot count meals or children in your head and then document them on the meal count form at a later time or date. As these none of those ways would provide an accurate meal count at the point of service, which is required by program regulations. As we've said several times already, you must count and record the meals as they are served to each child. And if you're serving more meals than one meal count form has numbers to document, then we want you to add additional forms and be sure to date and staple the forms together. So if you're serving more than 250 meals at one time and you're using our form, you will need, you'll need to have more than one meal count form each day. And if you're doing the delivery or drop-off meals, then the delivery driver or whoever's distributing the meals must mark the meal count sheet at the time the meals are delivered or dropped off, as this would be the point of service where the child receives the reimbursable meal. You could send the meal count sheet with them, or I think some schools also found it helpful to have like a roster if they were doing this type of distribution as well. Next slide. The online CMP system is where you will submit your monthly claim for reimbursement. Claims for reimbursement for the summer feeding program meals you serve to children are submitted monthly for each site that you operate. These monthly claims must be submitted and have an accepted status within 60 days of the last day of the month that the meals were served. Next slide. Okay. So we have this handy chart for claim submission available on our website that shows the last day for submission of each month's claim. So for example, for the month of April, you would have until June 29th to submit your April claim. We of course don't encourage you to wait until the 60th day to submit a claim. in case you run into any issues at the last minute, any computer issues or things like that, that would potentially cause you to miss out on that reimbursement. And the sooner you submit a claim, the sooner you'll be able to receive your reimbursement for those meals. Next slide. You can only receive reimbursement for the meal types reflected in your SFSP application. And your application must be approved by NDE with the updated meal service days for the summer before you can, before a claim can be submitted for those summer meals. Next slide. There is a claim consolidation form available on the Summer Food Service Program website. It's available as a fillable PDF or as an Excel worksheet. And you don't have to use our form, but you do need to have documentation of daily meal counts listed for each meal type and totals for each type of meal to demonstrate that the numbers you entered into the claim are correct. And since you claim by site, you need a separate claim consolidation form for each feeding site. And one other thing we wanted to point out, or wanted you guys to keep in mind for claiming, is when you're doing multi-day meal distribution, you need to ensure that you're claiming meals for the correct month or for the month for which the meals were intended for. So for example, if you're distributing 5 days of meals on Monday, June 28th, that week falls within 2 different months. So there are 3 days of that week in June and 2 days in July. So 3 of those meals are going to be claimed in June and 2 days of those meals are going to be claimed in July. Slide. When you're entering your claim for reimbursement, there's not a place to enter any of these meals listed here, and you never enter or claim meals for program adult meals, non-program adult meals, damaged, incomplete, or other non-reimbursable meals or leftover meals. And remember that meals cannot be claimed if your meal count form is incomplete or not completed accurately. And since most of you, go ahead and go to the next slide. Since most of you have been claiming meals through the Summer Food Service Program for most of the school year, I'm not going to go through step-by-step instructions for how to submit a claim, but directions on entering and revising a claim can be found on the SFSP Claim Entry Hints and Tips handout on our website. And that's all I have for meal counting and claiming. Up next on the agenda, we have food safety, and I will turn it over to Beth.
Beth, are you here?
I forgot to unmute. Sorry. Okay, so food safety is still required. This has not changed during COVID. Maintain your temperature logs. That is a requirement. The food temperatures for the food may be recorded on your production sheets, delivery tickets, or on the food cooking temperature log, whichever is easiest for you. You will also need to keep refrigeration, freezer, sanitizer, disinfectant, and thermometer calibration logs. Wearing a mask is still a best practice. The CDC and the Nebraska Department of Health and Human Services continues to recommend ongoing protection that includes wearing masks, maintain physical distance whenever possible, good ventilation, and hand washing properly and often. Make sure that you are sanitizing surfaces and equipment and disinfect the high-touched surfaces. Always wash, rinse, sanitize, and or disinfect, and then wash and rinse again with clear water. Make sure you are waiting the correct amount of time for your sanitizer and or disinfectant to be effective. Always use proper hand washing for at least 20 seconds. One of the things that some of the food safety inspectors have noticed as they've been out and about is that sometimes we forget to wash our hands or when to wash our hands. You do it, but you forget to do it all of the time. So after using the restroom, touching or the body or clothing, coughing, sneezing, blowing, or using a handkerchief or tissue, handling service animals, handling chemicals that could affect the food safety, and this was the most common error that was found by the food safety inspectors, changing tasks before and after, touching our electronics, leaving and returning to the kitchen prep area, touching anything else that might contaminate your hands, such as dirty dishes, dirty equipment, work surfaces, or cloths. Hand sanitizers must comply with the USDA standards. Only use hand sanitizers after hand washing. Never use hand sanitizers in place of hand washing, and wait for the hand sanitizer to dry before you touch food or equipment. Allie, next slide, please. For grab-and-go meals and any of the other meals, plan on your production to prevent leftover meals. Keep your foods cold. Your cold food cold, 41 or below. Hot foods, 135 or above. If temperature is not maintained, the food items must be discarded at the end of the meal service. This is to protect the participants. Leftovers may not be kept without proper holding equipment. So if you don't have refrigeration, you can't keep them overnight. If they were out of the temperature danger zone, they must be thrown out. If the leftover meals were held and cooled properly, you may use the leftovers meals first during the next meal service. Do not hold leftovers over the weekend if you do not have proper refrigeration. If you have proper holding and you are storing leftovers, you will need to record the date, time, and temperature on a cooling log. When the food safety inspectors comes to inspect your kitchen and they see leftovers, they will be asking to see the cooling temperature log and the thermometer calibration log. So adjust your orders for the next meal accordingly to prevent leftovers. Some things to consider if you are participating in congregate meal service and serving meals in the cafeteria. Self-serve bars are not a best practice. If you are serving in the cafeteria and you want to add the self-serve bars or open water stations, check with your local health departments to see if they are allowed. If you are, you will need to have a plan in place on how you will keep the self-serve bars safe for your students and participation. Don is going to enter the health department's map in the chat for me, but more than likely your superintendent or your business manager has the local health department on speed dial. At this time, share tables are not allowed due to controlling high touches. We are not allowed to use sanitizer or disinfectant on food or food containers that participants would touch, just in case it doesn't get wiped off and it impermeates into the thick skin of the fruit. If you come up with a safe plan that will meet the food code and is approved by your local health department, you may use the share tables, but you must keep that documentation on file. Allie, next slide, please. If you are planning to distribute meals for multiple days, you will need to make sure that food safety procedures are followed from the time that you receive the food items through service, pickup, or delivery has occurred. Also think about the family and if they will have room for multiple days. Some families may not be able to handle large amounts of food if you're offering meals for 5 or 7 days. Some foods hold better than others. Sandwich salads, such as tuna and chicken salad, do not hold well, and they are pre-made. They get soggy, and that's not a good thing. So think about how you're packing your items. Chicken nuggets, ham, and cheese wraps, pre-cooked hamburgers are examples of food that store well. Fresh apples, oranges, and bananas store well at room temperature, so they don't have to worry about refrigerating. However, cut melons must be refrigerated, so put some thought into your menu. And I cannot stress this enough. Milk needs to be kept cold during service, grab-and-go times, and deliveries. Leaving the milk at room temperature during delivery is not allowed. That is unacceptable. It doesn't matter if the delivery is only 15 minutes away, it needs to be refrigerated and kept cold. Otherwise, it shortens the shelf life of milk. Store the cold foods separately from the hot. You may freeze items and send them if you're doing more than one day. Send thawing and cooking instructions, as well as the food safety instructions. ICN has a great food safety poster if you don't want to make your own. And Donna's going to enter that into the chat box. And right now, the the cooking and food safety instructions are on the front page. Food safety inspections will happen this summer as long as COVID stays under control. Remember to keep food safe and have a great summer. At this time, I would like to turn the presentation over to Katie, who will present on allowable cost and procurement.
Thanks, Beth. You did a great job on that very important update as we prepare for summertime meal service. And as Beth indicated, we'll cover the last topic for today's training, including allowable costs and some guidelines you'll want to be sure to follow regarding procurement, just like you do during normal school year operations. So as you can imagine, allowable program costs include anything related to your operation and administration of the program. That would include costs for items like the food used to provide meals to children, any non-food supplies that you use for food service. Some of you may be needing to pay for or rent space so that you can serve meals, and that would be an allowable cost to the program. Even meals served to adult volunteers or paid staff who work directly with meal service are allowed to receive a meal free of charge, but at a cost to the program. So this is different if it's a non-program adult, like a parent, grandparent, aunt, or uncle accompanying a child to a meal service site. Remember from earlier today, we shared that those meals are not allowed to be served for free to them. They must pay for their meals. This is a slightly different situation. If you have a paid staff member or adult volunteer directly involved in meal preparation or meal service, they are allowed to receive a meal just like the children receive and do not have to pay for it. And if you recall back to the forms Erica provided us wonderful details for, you would notice that there is a section designated for recording a program adult meals. And so that's where you would record those meals. If you have questions about whether a program adult or adult should be designated as a program adult in order to receive a meal free of charge, please reach out to one of our program specialists. Give us more details about the duties that this person has regarding the summer meals program, and we will be able to provide you with proper guidance as to whether or not that would be considered a program adult who can receive a meal free of charge. You can go to the next slide, Allie. As you can imagine, there are unallowable costs associated with the program. This means that you cannot use the program's reimbursement money to cover the cost of the items listed on the slide here. And this is not a comprehensive list. If you have questions about allowable versus unallowable costs, again, I would encourage you to reach out to a member of our nutrition services team to seek additional information and guidance on allowable versus unallowable costs. But a few of those that might be more common questions regarding unallowable costs would be those associated with preparing meals above and beyond what you actually serve to children. So for those of you who have vendor agreements to receive meals from an outside entity, if you order far exceeding what you're going to serve every day, you'd have to have some other funding source to be able to cover the cost of those meals. You're not able to claim them for reimbursement, obviously, if they never reached a child's hands. And if they didn't reach a child's hands, you're not receiving reimbursement for them. You've got to have an outside funding source. And this really just highlights the importance of planning and ordering meals or preparing meals as best you can in line with your anticipated and experience you have with the number of meals you serve and children who attend your site each day. Meals that don't meet the meal pattern requirements are also not allowed to be covered or paid for using reimbursement dollars. Your sponsorship requires that you provide meals that meet all of the meal pattern requirements. So that's what you're reimbursed to do. You're reimbursed to provide a breakfast that provides all three components. You're reimbursed to provide a lunch that meets all of the meal pattern requirements, whether or not you're using offer versus serve. So that's really what you need to keep in mind. Also, other meals that might be served at an unapproved site, as in a site that is not indicated in your application packet, or a site that is just sitting there without all of the necessary information about meal service days and times, that has not been reviewed and approved by us, would be examples of unapproved sites at which reimbursement cannot be used to cover the cost for. So that would end up being a disallowance. So make sure that that application is up to date and current. If you have questions or issues regarding the application packet, if you run into errors or anything like that you can't get rid of, make sure to let us know. We would hate for something like that to impact the ability for you to pay for meals you're actually serving to children when that happens. You can go to the next slide, Allie. I think we have a couple of quick polling questions, Allie, related to unallowable versus allowable costs. We can go ahead and launch those out. They're just very quick ones, pretty common sense items, but we'll get your brain thinking about how to determine allowable versus unallowable costs.
I put all the questions, I put all 4 in the poll, Katie. So everyone make sure you scroll down. There is a number 4.
Thanks, Allie. So just take a couple of minutes to go through these 4 questions. Choose the answer, whether you believe that item is allowable or not allowable. I'll have Allie monitor so she can let us know when most people have provided their answer.
We'll maybe give 30 more seconds. We're about halfway there since there's 4 questions. Okay.
Yeah. Great job, everybody. Obviously, yes, those foods you purchase to be put into meals served to children are allowable costs. You want to make sure you keep all the receipts for costs that you're charging, so to speak, to the program. That is the things you're paying for using the reimbursement you receive. You must keep the documentation for that. Not only are we reviewing records you keep, we also sort of serve as a financial auditor for you to make sure the records you're keeping validate that you're spending money on those allowable costs, and receipts and invoices are one of the best ways to do that. Our second question asked you whether coffee purchased for food service staff to drink maybe during breaks in the day or when they're preparing meals to be served later is an allowable cost. And the answer to that is no, it's not allowable. That coffee is not being served to children as part of a reimbursable meal. Therefore, it's not an allowable cost to the program like other foods that are used in those meals would be considered. Can you use program funds to cover transportation costs related to delivering meals to sites? And the answer to this one actually is yes. That is an allowable cost. You just want to make sure you keep mileage records for the vehicles that are used to deliver these meals, and then records of how much money was sort of put into or charged to the school food service account to cover the mileage costs associated with this delivery method. And our final question here is asking you whether meals served to adults who accompany children to a meal service site are allowable. And the answer to that, I think 9.9 times out of 10 is going to be 0. We have that one small exception. If this adult happens to be involved in food preparation or meal service, has it like a direct role in making those things happen, then there is a chance that that meal would be an allowable cost, meaning you would not have to charge the adult for that meal. But if you have any questions or instances where you think you may want to see if this option is allowable for you, I encourage you to reach out to one of the program specialists so we can gather more details and be able to determine if that type of meal is allowed for that adult to receive for free. This is probably not a new document for many of you. For some of you, it might be. I just wanted to highlight quickly that I think for most of the purchases that our summer food service sponsors make, they're going to be considered micro purchases, meaning you're going to spread the wealth across all available vendors or suppliers for you. If there happens to be a situation where you want to choose one specific vendor or supplier to provide you with something you purchase, then we would encourage you to refer to the decision tree and then consult one of our program specialists to ensure that you're meeting the required procurement methods necessary for what you want to get and from who you want to receive it. Thank you, Allie. You can move to the next slide. Just a quick note about reimbursement and how that's calculated. It's a combination of operating and administrative costs, which you see at the table on the bottom of this slide. Your reimbursement is based on a combination of those two amounts multiplied by the number of meals based on the meal type or types that you serve. And so that reimbursement, like Erica said, I believe is only allowed at those approved sites and after you've got that approved application with NDE. So make sure your application is current and up to date, that the meal service information reflected in it, not only in the types of meals you serve, but also in the number of meal service days you serve each month is accurate in order to avoid errors and delays in receiving this reimbursement. Next slide, Allie. So starting on January 1st, 2021, the reimbursement rates reflected on this table would be what you receive through the end of the calendar year. So for the duration of the summer, for most sites, that's going to be about $4.31 per lunch and between $2.50 and $3 per breakfast if you serve both of those meal types. But this is the table that's available on our website through the quick links available on the menu of items on the left-hand side of the page. Next slide, Allie. Yeah, if you've got questions, like we mentioned, there's a lot to learn here, lots of details to be aware of and be adherent to. Please always ask one of our program specialists. We're here to help you. I think that's the part of the job that most of us enjoy the most. And that's what we're here for. We want you to reach out to us and make sure that you understand and feel comfortable with all the program rules and regulations, especially in light of this being somewhat a unique year with the availability of waivers. We want to make sure you feel comfortable with the way you're implementing them and that you have integrity procedures and policies in place to adhere to all the program requirements and regulations. That concludes the presentation for today. I know we have received some questions in the chat box and we sort of tried to answer those along the way, but I think we'd like to be able to share those with the group verbally in case anyone missed those. We can also do our best to answer them, but I'd also encourage you to enter your questions in the chat box now. You also have the option to unmute if you'd like to say your question verbally. Please, Beth, while people kind of formulate questions they're willing to share either in the chat box or by unmuting, would you mind starting us off with one of the early questions we received?
I will. Can we open for congregate lunch and send breakfast home for the following day?
can answer that. I guess other people certainly chime in, but yes, that would be allowed by utilizing the non-congregate and meal service time waivers. As Erica mentioned, it's so important to make sure you're recording an accurate meal count for each meal type you're serving. So obviously you'd be doing your lunch meal count while they're receiving lunch. And then if they leave with the breakfast that's intended for the next day, you'd be marking a separate meal count sheet for the breakfast that, like I said, you're intending for them to eat the following day. Am I missing anything there? Someone can chime in and give make that answer better.
Great job, Katie.
Very good. Okay. Do you have signage available for us to use for the 1 to 18-year-olds?
Yeah, I saw this question in there. I can't remember who sent it. We did send out like a free marketing materials email a while ago with a form. So if you send me an email, I will make sure that I get that form over to you. I apologize that you were missed in the communication for that, but I'll put my email address in the chat box. And our office associate will take care of filling that request for you. And I typed my email address wrong. I can't type and talk at the same time.
Okay. The next question is, do we have to keep records for program integrity? And if so, how long?
The program integrity piece is at the sponsor level, that you are ensuring program integrity. And so that would be maintained on site. However, the method you choose to do that. What is required, of course, is the accuracy of your meal count, but the integrity piece is at the sponsor level for you to implement to ensure the integrity of the program.
I guess maybe the other thing I'd add, I'm not sure exactly what Brenna's question was. I also would remind people, because we did not say it explicitly on a slide, but to keep all of your program records for 4 years. I think that might be a piece of the integrity. Maybe you said that, Sean. I was like reading the chat box while you were answering. Other thing I would mention is that in the site application update guide that we will provide to you, there is a comments from sponsor box at the bottom of each site application. So if there are integrity plans you plan to implement because of waivers you're utilizing for meal service, we would encourage you to give us a few details about that as it applies to the specific site you're completing an application for. That's another way that we can maybe provide you some support and feedback on your plan, and also a way for you to document what you're doing.
Awesome. Thank you. Who do we contact to set up site review? Oh, the site review. And the site reviews are, the monitoring is your responsibility. We will be doing actual summer food service program reviews only on our regular summer participants. Unless we have new ones, and then they'll be getting a new summer review. It'll probably be a desk review like we did for the majority of the schools since last March. Okay. Trying to see if we have any more. Oh. The PLE is the PLE tool available for calculating meal prices for 2021-22?
The answer to that is no, not yet. We are waiting for the USDA to provide guidance on the return to school for the 21-22 school year. We imagine the PLE part is sort of, a consideration in the plan that they're making. And we hope to receive that information before April is over.
Okay. So should we still try to follow vegetable subgroups under summer food service program?
Sean, you did a good job answering that.
Okay, I will answer it to the crowd. And if you are following the summer food service meal pattern, the vegetable subgroup requirement is not required. You are required to meet the food components and portion sizes of the summer food service program.
Good job. Okay, could the students grab their own packaged utensils and milk cartons because they are in containers or wrapped? COVID precautions. If you already have a system in place that has been approved by your local health department, that is fine. You may do that. If you have not gotten it approved, then you need to get it approved by your local health department, what your plan is. And that's all the questions that I see. Did anybody else see any questions?
Just a couple about the resources that will be available after the training. We're going to probably take a moment as a team to review any small edits we would like to make to this. We will post this slide deck, eventually the recording after we complete the same training again next Tuesday afternoon for folks who weren't able to join us today, along with updated resources available specific to the upcoming summer on the forms and resources and training pages on our website. So we'll make sure to send an email communication out to folks when all of the resources related to training today, as well as updated forms you could be using for this summer out to the group as soon as we've got those things finalized. I would expect that they would be ready to go by the end of next week. So that's kind of the anticipated or planned timeline.
And I know everyone is, oh my gosh, I don't know why that feedback, but I know everyone is probably anxious to update their application, but remember to hold off because we are awaiting further guidance from USDA. Till after our Serving Up Great School Meals is, the next one is May 5th. And so we're asking you to hold off till after that presentation in hopes that we will have further guidance from USDA to help you with the dates, if the waivers would be extended.
Yeah, I agree, Sean. Doing that just helps avoid some of that back and forth. If you submit revisions now and we learn you can use the program beyond just summer meals, then we have to send it back to you and you revise again. We just think it'll make the process a little bit faster for you all by holding off just a little bit. Yeah, I don't see any more questions. I think we want to thank all of you for taking the time to join us today. We also appreciate all of the questions you send our way. They help us think through things and see things from your perspective. So we appreciate that very much. And if you think of questions that come up as you discuss with your team and make your plan for the upcoming summer, don't hesitate to let us know. Thanks very much.